Does carb loading actually improve your performance as a cyclist, or is it just a myth? I'm Dr. Gemma Sampson. I'm an advanced sports dietitian specializing in performance nutrition for cyclists. And today I have two guests on the podcast with me, a former client of mine, Glen, and his mate, Dave.
Gemma, Dave. Although you have met.
Yeah, I believe
lots of good things about you.
I believe we've met unofficially.
Haven't we? That's right, true. Perhaps not at your best time.
No, definitely not my finest moment. So, oh dear. But,
A for effort, though.
I know exactly. Like you've got it. Like even you haven't done a full training session or race if you haven't vomited afterwards. So definitely.
Would you recommend that as a good way to? Yeah, me either. I'm not a vomiter usually. In most of
right, that's a first. That was a first for me for sure. So I think just the first time I'm doing any sort of intensity in probably about 2 years. So it was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah,
absolutely. As a nutritionist and perhaps a coach, would you recommend that's a good way of getting back into a sport?
I mean, I probably would put a lot of people off. So
yeah, doing it or watching it.
Yeah, or either. Like, yeah. I wouldn't recommend watching it. I'm like, leave me alone, go away.
So Gemma, we'll take your lead. What is it that you want to discuss? It was so great to catch up with you the other day, and I had a great time. Great riding. Great.
Yeah, it's always nice when I can catch up and meet clients in real life, whether it's planned or unplanned. And like I say, it was a great ride, a good day out on the bike, sort of smashing ourselves on the bike. No throwing up, not that I witnessed as well, so that was good. I think that's going to be the forever in joke, because did you vomit on that one?
Yes.
I was hanging on for dear life because it was a plan. Originally, I'd planned on like a 40k easy cruisy ride. They're like, "Oh, so you're going to come to the end of Wollonga with me?" And I was like, well, if I can get some food, I'll be all right. Yeah, I'll be all right. I'll be fine. I've got enough. If I get enough food,
I got to say, you really impressed me, because we did 30 k's flat riding, and then Dave, just to give you an idea of what it was like, I got on the front and pushed 270 watts up and down hills, and Gemma, I would say we were averaging 34, 35, and Gemma stayed on no problems, and then up the hills. I was sitting on about 320, and again,
I think I was about 270 to sit on the back of the wheel. So I was literally sitting on the wheel. I'm like, no room.
I was really impressed, Gemma. So well done. Yeah.
No, it was good. It was nice to get a good training camp in the legs, basically, because I sort of came in with like a pretty base, very low level of fitness, and came out with like 900 kilometers in the legs, and I was like, all right, I'm going to avoid the climbs, but I've still got good legs on the flats, so I was like, yeah, maybe I should just stick to the flats and the crits and the high.
You had some great legs on the flats. No, because we were going quick, and even the boys. Dave, it was Nick Johns and Hugh Harvey. Now, Hugh Harvey had just beaten Caleb Ewan in 2 races at Heffron. Oh, okay, so this Hugh Harvey is just insanely strong.
Yeah,
he tested that. He said he tested his FTP when he first got on the bike only 10 weeks before beating Caleb at 3:30 straight out of rowing. And then when he tested the weeks of beating Caleb Ewan, he tested at 370 watts FTP after being on the bike for 10 months.
It's a big part of it, isn't it? Genetics. It's hard to beat.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately. 100%. Well, that's it. Like there's multiple factors influencing performance, and that's kind of where nutrition plays a big role in optimizing. Like we all have our unique potential of what we're capable of, and that's going to be very different from person to person. And whether you're a sprinter, you're a climber, you're like an all-rounder, whatever. But then the fueling then plays a big role as to whether you actually achieve that potential or don't. Glenn was talking about, like, do you know what? Like the best thing we did, one of the best things that we did was talking about the carb loading, and that really made such a difference. Starting with Glenn, talking about your experience with learning how to carb load and any sort of where you sort of started coming when we began to work together.
Yeah, so after working with you for 3 months, I guess there were 5 or 6 big lessons in there. And one of them was the carb load session. The carb load session of just how much carbs you really need to load, how much you can take in, and I was very surprised at the amount of carbs. I recall that you had a graph up on the screen, and it talked about the 8 to 10 grams per kilogram, or it was a per kilogram of body weight up until a certain weight, and after that certain weight, you can't get any more carbs in because it's just going to make you sick. So there was sort of like a ceiling of total carbs somebody can have in a day. And you really, as I'm a heavy rider, I'm really pushing into that ceiling. But it was also, when I tried the carb load, I realized just how hard it was to hit those numbers. And I used a lot of the tricks that you taught me in that lesson, with the the rice crackers and the sugary drinks, and still it's a lot of carbs. Yeah. However, I had a conversation with Dave shortly after, and Dave doesn't have any problems hitting those kind of numbers with the carbs. So I guess it's up to the individual. But I certainly hadn't in the past been having anything like that. Admittedly, we discussed that, it was more for a 60-minute TT sort of minimum, or an hour and a half road race kind of situation. Anything bigger than that, then you would definitely benefit from carb loading. And I got to say, there's not that many races that we do that's over an hour and a half. And I certainly don't do a TT that's longer than 1 hour. But I also appreciate that if you have a few events back to back, you can deplete yourself on the first day, going into the second day. Now it's not as if, I'm an amateur cyclist, so it's not as if we do any tours and stage races. But I've recently started to hit the states and nationals races, and that is where we have races back to back. So we will have a crit one day, a road race another day, and then a TT another day. So when you start looking at them individually, they probably don't warrant a carb load, but when you put them back to back, they actually do. And I think the studies show that performance starts to decrease, not when you're completely empty, but as you start to deplete glycogen stores. So you want those glycogen stores essentially topped up at the start of the race for every single race that you do. And so it was those sort of state rides that I started to do the carb loading for. And when I mentioned this kind of stuff to Dave, he had a race coming up called the Bob and Head Classic. Is that what it's called, Dave?
Yeah, charity ride. No, not a race.
Let's call it a race because
it's timed at your own number, so you figure it out.
There's so many events that then like races, events, they can be charity rides, but often we're going in and we want to beat our mate, or we want to beat our own time, or make a PB on a particular segment. Like going in with your best performance and enjoying the day as best as you can in mind.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Yes. So
I mentioned that to Dave, and Dave, like he does most things, took everything on board and gave it a go. And Dave, why don't you tell us your experience with the carb load for that? Was it a 3-hour race?
Yeah, so it was, total time was 3 hours 20. So as Glenn said, we don't have races or rides for that matter that go too long. But this one I knew was going to be around the 3-hour mark. I think my first time doing it was 4 hours 50, and so I've been bringing the time down over the years, and had a high goal of breaking 3 hours, but I thought anything close to that would be good. And so with the information that Glenn had shared, I thought I'd give it a go. The days leading up, aimed for 600, 800 grams of carbs in the 2 days leading up. And it is hard to do, certainly hard to get that amount in, but not too insurmountable. Yeah, definitely using soft drinks and gels, which I think I resorted to on this occasion the last few hours before going to bed, where I was a bit shy, just to top it up. But I do like eating, so it was mostly fun. But it does get difficult, I think, in the last those last few hundred grams of carbs can be challenging, but not too bad. And I guess I like eating, so it was a good challenge. It was a fun challenge to find ways to get that in, and trying to, obviously the balance between trying to just get the carbs in and just pure sugar and getting some good nutrients too. There's a balance there, but yeah, you can't, as Glen said, you can't do it entirely through highly nutritious food, but still try and make that the core of it. So did that, and previously I have carb loaded, but I tell myself I was carb loading, but in reality I was just I just heard you should have more carbs the night before, so I would have an extra serve of dinner. Like, it wasn't anything calculated, it wasn't measured, it wasn't anything at all scientific. It was just based on
50 grams more. I see.
Yeah,
I heard
exactly.
that. Yeah,
it would be about that. Yeah. Not looking into it, so just thought, oh yeah, can't hurt, and it didn't hurt, I'm sure, but didn't really help either, I think, marginally anyway. So this time, Bob and Headers on the 18th of September, and so yeah, loaded up and did that ride, and I was really strongly amazed how good I felt at the end of it. The legs just felt like the start of the ride. Like, it just felt like my legs were just didn't decline throughout the ride at all. It just felt they were constant. I could keep giving efforts and surges when needed without any thought of conserving for the longevity of the ride. So yeah, amazed. Did it again on December 6th. That was the home to Sydney to Gong to home ride we did. So that was 6 hours 46, 190 k's. It's a lot longer, so definitely applicable to this situation. And again, hit close to 800 grams of carbs the day before, and I think the second day before, 2 days before. And once again, just amazed, like 5 hours into this ride, and still felt like the start of the ride. And obviously I was still eating during the ride too, as normal, trying to hit 80 grams or more of carbs per hour. But that in the past alone has not been sufficient to, I mean, you get through, but this time it just feels so, for me, my experience is the legs. You just feel the legs it doesn't affect your breathing and heart rate, these things, and which makes sense, it wouldn't. But for me, the legs just felt like they were fresh from start to finish with no let up at all. It was, yeah, amazing.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic feedback, and it's things that I hear a lot. And it's this is why I love getting clients or riders. I say, like, we've never worked together. We've met on the side of the road in Penrith once at a bike race, but I love seeing that ripple effect of somebody feeling and seeing the difference, like, oh, this works, you try it, and then actually slowly we can all change that whole culture of fueling and performance in nutrition and cycling. Whereas, exactly like you said before, that race nutrition, like that carb loading, it's not everyday nutrition, and trying to do it in a healthy way, it's the volume of food you're trying to get in just becomes so limiting. Whereas you go and use more simple, faster, more rapid fuels to kind of minimize that gut impact. But then you finish your race, you still feel good, and then you can go and you can kind of eat normally afterwards. Like, how did you feel like after, like, did you notice a difference how you felt after that sort of race compared to previous races where you didn't carb load?
Good question. That thought didn't come to mind. I'm not sure there was a difference. It's more the performance. I don't think there was a difference after. Nothing springs to mind. Like, I'm lucky in terms of eating that. I think I've done well. I usually do well with nutrition. I haven't got a good aerobic system, but longer events I can do well because I do stay disciplined with the eating. But in terms of after, no. I mean, I'm lucky that I can eat as much as I can eat pretty much anything throughout the ride and have no. I don't think I ever had gut distress during a ride. So people say they get sick of gels. I've done 8-hour Audax rides having 28, 30 gels and get in the car and there's more. Cool. Like, I've never had anything too sweet. So to me, it's just never a problem for eating it. So I've had no issue in that front, but this is before. So this is preparation before. So for me, it has clearly had an effect because I can't eat well during an event, yet this still had a big impact. So, but after, I have no answer for that. Yeah.
And it kind of links into, like, I'm always trying to encourage people to fuel more in training. And one of the biggest barriers that I see, people are usually scared. They think, oh, I'm going to gain weight if I eat more. If I eat on the bike, I'm going to gain weight. Whereas I find the timing is so critical, and it almost doesn't matter what you eat on those training sessions, those rides, those events. There's still a big deficit going on. And when you've carb loaded well the day before, that's helping to kind of buffer that deficit. So like you say, you have those legs available still at the end of the ride versus being just literally empty.
Yeah. Yes.
I can tell you, for me, prior to dialing the nutrition, I would do long rides and probably not eat enough. And it's taken a while for Dave to even sort of educate me with, with his findings and research, and then listening to probably hundreds of podcasts now, the more I get into it. I compare my appetite after a long ride, say 5 years ago. I was ravenous. I would get home so hungry that I would eat anything in the cupboard. And now that I feel appropriately, I just don't get those feelings anymore. So I don't come home and raid the cupboard. And in fact, most time I would, not that I have to force myself to have a recovery drink, but it's something I have to consciously think about, because I'm not driven by hunger to do that. So I did 110 Ks this morning and come home and thought I didn't feel hungry. I didn't overdo the carbs. I only did probably 200 grams of carbs. So I was doing around the 40 grams per hour. And so I didn't certainly overdo it. And I had breakfast before I left. So again, just didn't feel hungry, but reminded myself of the importance of that recovery drink, the protein and the carbs. So I had that. But yeah, definitely before, always ravenous after a long ride.
Yeah. And this is what, like, they're often like really subtle little changes, but as they say, prioritizing it, remembering that actually this is going to be beneficial for me. Even if I don't feel like I need it right now, I will need it in 4 hours time if I don't. And yeah, that comment about the ravenous hunger is something I hear a lot when people get the timing right. And it's an art, and we don't always get it right. Sometimes we mess it up and we have hunger flats on rides, and that's just part and parcel of riding. And but the main thing is that we learn from it, and okay, next time I do an event like this, I need to I know what to take so that I can avoid getting in that scenario again.
I got to say, when you talk about a hunger flat, I laugh at that now, because the ride that we did to Wollonga, I then rode back from Wollonga with the two boys that are very strong, and we had a really hard hit out session. Managed to get a few comms along the way, but I hit a wall so hard, it's not funny, because I hadn't planned 140 Ks that day. I had not considered my nutrition going into the ride. I think we had breakfast together after a 40K ride. That was the first amount of food that I'd had for the day. And I certainly didn't preload any carbs. I didn't carb load the day before. I was probably in a deficit from the day before. So I've done everything wrong into our Wollonga ride, and I completely blew up. So on the way home from that ride, Hugh Harvey was pushing me up the last hill. Now, I've got to say, no one's physically pushing me up the hill. So no one's pushed me up the hill. I've pushed plenty of people up the hill. I'm usually the stronger rider in a group, and he was pushing me up the hill. And it was quite embarrassing.
Welcome to my world, not being the strongest one in the group.
Yeah, well, not second to Hugh Harvey isn't too bad, but yeah, being pushed up and I knew exactly what it was. I wasn't surprised whatsoever. It was my pre-ride nutrition, and it was my ride nutrition that failed me. It wasn't my body. It wasn't the power. It wasn't my fitness. It was just my nutrition.
Yeah, and there are situations that happen. I mean, similar situation. I went out on that 40K ride plan. I went out with 3 Muesli bars, and I think this was the second time it had happened that week. Within, I think, 2 days earlier, the same thing had happened where I'd ended up on a 160K ride. And that ride, another client of mine, he's like, he just kept feeding me. He just kept passing me food, because I'm like, well, I can come on this ride, but I need more food. They're like, yeah, that's fine, we'll feed you. And whereas this one, because we had the 40K easy ride, coffee, and then we're like, okay, well, let's go and have breakfast. We had breakfast, and then while we were waiting, I stopped. I grabbed some extra bars from the shop, a bottle of Gatorade. I think that's what I had. And so, because I anticipated it was going to be full gas.
I didn't do that. See, that's where you were thinking, and I wasn't. I was just in the moment.
I knew that I could do the distance. I knew that we'd be pushing some pretty serious pace, and I knew that probably trying to chew bars isn't going to happen. And so yeah, I had the Gatorade in the bottle, and that was what I was drinking on while I was like tucked in, just trying to like sit on the wheels for the whole. And then the second we got to Wanga, straight to the petrol station, chocolate. I think I got 2 chocolate milks, which I smashed straight away, and then a bottle of Solo. And it was the Solo that got me back home, because I left earlier because I had things I had to be back for in town. So yeah, like it is very much this case of the more you do it, the more it becomes intuitive, and you play around, and you kind of know what your limit is. And I would have still been in a major deficit that day, but it was just enough to keep me ticking along.
Yep. Well, I would have been able to make it home no problems if we Hugh, Andy and myself didn't do a massive hit out. It was almost a chop ride. Like, we were just hurting each other on the way home. If we didn't do that, because I mean, once you start going over FTP, you're really digging into those glycogen stores. So I have no doubt that that's what it was.
For sure.
I don't think
carb loading, it's about like you're fueling for your training. It's all about being proactive and thinking about what have you got coming on the next day. And so Adelaide, Tour Down Under, if you're riding, chances are you're going to, I mean, I did 900 Ks when I was there. So that was the biggest week I've ever done. But I was avoiding the hills a lot because I knew that I wasn't going to get up the hills. And I intentionally added some of those flat, easy rides in. And so different types of rides, different foods. So solid food for more the shorter, less intense ones, and then liquids or gels or lollies for the harder ones. And so, but part of that is being proactive, of thinking, okay, what am I doing tomorrow? How am I going to eat today? And how's that going to support what I do tomorrow? So that, you've got the legs from the get-go and recover sooner. Absolutely.
Dave, you were going to say something?
We're going to go with that. We had someone saw you, Gemma, holding a sign saying something to the effect of eating is not cheating, it is fueling your workout.
Yeah, fueling for
performance. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't Glen. Someone else spotted you doing that, and that got us to a bit of discussion. And I think I've been lucky. I don't think I've ever had hunger flat, any issue or any bonking like that during riding. I think because my first ever rides, mate who got me into it, we were just going for short rides, like an hour, which was long for me back then. But even then, he was saying, make sure you bring some food. And then I'm hearing podcasts and so on. So I've always brought with me extra food. It's invariably something happens where you go longer, or someone else needs food or something. So
100%. Taking extra hours more than you think you're going to need.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I'll have a plan. So so many times I'm getting dressed and I think, okay, grab the extra food. It's extra food. It's not really necessary. Nah, I should. I always err on the side of caution. I just take a bit extra. Like I have enough food for the ride, and I'll grab a few more as well, just extra, or that plus have an idea. Okay, we're going past this other station at some point, so if you ever need to. So I think I've been luckily very aware of the need. I think it's just been drummed into me through listening to different episodes of podcasts on the topic of nutrition and how important it is. So I've been lucky that way. So I haven't had to experience the negative to learn my lesson. But I just found the numbers. So for the Sydney to Geelong to home ride, the day before I actually hit 836 grams of carbs on that day. And the Bob and Head, though, I only managed to hit 603 the day before and 455 the day before that. So not quite as much, but a shorter ride though, I guess. So it still seemed adequate. 600 still seemed like it was sufficient for that. I guess 3 hours 20. So.
And that kind of links on to what Glen was saying a bit earlier about the recommendations. If you look at the science, they say 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram. But again, it is very individual, coming down to people's body size and physical shape and size, structure. And I find that 500-600 grams for most people is kind of the sweet spot. In practice, I see most people eating about 200-300 grams, maybe 400 grams in everyday life and training, but we typically need an extra 200-300 grams more to carb load really well. And I do find that, that 600 grams seems to be the sweet spot for most people. And once people start going over about 700, that's when the gut issues can sometimes start to come in place, where people find it just more challenging, because to eat that much carbohydrate, you do have to be intentional. You do have to be reducing your fiber, reducing your protein, reducing your fat. For women as female cyclists to carb load efficiently, we need to increase our overall energy needs about 30% more than every day in order to achieve a minimum amount. As a minimum, you need at least 6 grams per kilogram, but they're just some interesting facts that useful to sort of be aware of, and testing it out and recording it. So you've obviously recorded it, which is fantastic, because that's something I'll tell people to do. Like, make a note of it and record what you do, because then you can reflect on it and be like, did that work? What am I going to do next time? And how can I improve this to make it easier or less of a challenge next time?
Yeah. Yes. Tangential note, my Fitness Pal, for some reason on the web interface, doesn't have the totals. It has each bit of food, its amount, and you can see there's 100, 150, 200, and there's a total 30. It doesn't add up. The app's got it though, so I had to dig it through there. You're saying so over 600 then, like even for larger people like myself and Glen, who are like, I'm 88 kilos right now, so 10 is 880. That's maybe not necessary. You're thinking 600 could be all you need, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and the evidence to show that 600, you still improve your, like, you felt a noticeable difference. So because it's a combination of things, because there's the noticeable difference that you feel is visual, and then the performance difference that you can see comparing power and numbers and stuff. So it might be that you somewhere between 600 and 800 for you is optimal, and there's no real right or wrong. And the fact that you'd had 2 days, like the 400 the day before, that 2 days collectively would have helped with that too. Right. So I think nutrition is frustrating, because there's the science, put it in the practice, there's an art, and just what was amazing for Glen might be not great for you, and vice versa.
We're all so unique, aren't we?
Yeah. We're
all so unique. So I noticed that with nutrition, there is no one answer for anything. We're all so different.
Yeah, and that's why I always encourage people to test it in practice. And that's what training, if you're racing or doing events, training is practice for that. And so practicing your nutrition and becoming more. So it's fantastic that you was introduced straight away into fueling for your rides, and our environment plays a big impact. Like, I've met many people who no one around them eats or drinks ever. And so that's normalized. And then you hit the cafe, and then you just go to town and eat all the food in the cafe, and then you go home and you cactus on the couch for the rest of the day, and that's just normalized, where actually it doesn't have to be normal.
I'm going to say, I think that's more of the normal mentality, because Dave, I think you're a little bit more unique, because you started to tackle those Audax rides quite early in your cycling journey, and you did a lot of research into how to actually do a 200-kilometer ride. And so I think you self-taught a lot of that eating and making sure you're fueling your body for a 200-kilometer ride. Whereas I know that I've ridden with many club members locally, and so many times I've heard Craig say, even, eating is cheating. He'll do a 140-kilometer ride with a bottle of water and a gel. And we had a ride, and another club member really struggled on one of our rides just last week. It was a 140-kilometer ride. So he'd ridden the day before in the middle of the day, and it was a 35-degree day. So he'd done 55 kilometers in the middle of the day. So he was probably a little bit heat stroke. And he then didn't quite eat properly that day at all. So he mentioned to me that he'd only had 2 meals that day. So that would have been maybe breakfast and dinner. And so he's come into a 140 kilometer ride, underfueled, probably glycogen depleted, probably with a little heat stroke.
Yep.
And the description of the day's ride was 30 to 35 kilometer average, 130 kilometer loop with a climb in the middle. And so, you know, he's already coming into that so depleted.
The days that you struggled from the get-go. He
struggled from the get-go, and then in the middle of the ride, it's at about the 70 kilometer mark that there's a 4 kilometer 6% climb, and it's probably only 250 vertical meters, but it's a solid 10-minute effort, and we all went out at our own pace, but we went out very, very hard, and he absolutely capitulated mid climb, to the point where he had to get off the bike because he thought he was going to pass out. So we nursed him back, and I identified quite early that it was, you know, fueling. We got him some gels, and then we got to the top of the climb. We got him some, got him a V drink, actually. I don't know if that would have helped with the caffeine and the guarana, but mainly to get the sugars into him. And we got him home, but he felt terrible. He'd actually, you know, hit the wall mid 130 kilometer ride and had to try and crawl home. And I know, I've been there. There is no coming back once you've hit the wall. Once you've bonked, and you can't eat yourself out of a bonk. You just feel shit for the whole ride.
It's like a car with a fuel tank, but the fuel tank is on bone dry, and it's like basically you're trying to push the car because there's no fuel in the car to drive it itself. So
that's right.
you have to stop the car to refill it up, and then it can go again.
A funny analogy, because Tony, who got me into cycling 10 years ago, he said he had a hunger flat, and the guy he was with said to him, "You put fuel in the car to drive it, right?" So your body's the same. It was like, yeah, same analogy you're using there, just so true.
Yeah, what was the quote? He said, do you put fuel in the car before you drive it or after you drive it?
Well, that's it. And this is the thing, like, I think so many people demonize, like, it's all got to be high fat, it's all got to be low fat. Like, they both have their place. And for endurance, like the Audax, these long distance ride, yes, you want to be efficient at using fat as fuel, but that comes at the cost of performance and speed. So we use the carbohydrates from the glycogen or the carbs that we're consuming for the speed and that like ongoing performance. But we can create that energy from the fat, but it might be a massive 20% or even less of the speed or the power capacity that we could do if we're using carbohydrate and our glycogen stores efficiently. And yeah, even I've gotten it wrong before, and it's usually a case of you're running around, you haven't planned anything, and you've forgotten to eat, and you're busy, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I haven't eaten anything, and I've got this like 160k ride tomorrow, and it's like 4,000 meters of climbing, and then you get on the start line, and you're like, I'm like 5k like kilometers per hour slower, my watts are down like by 50 watts or something stupid, and you're like, just feel like death warmed up. You just don't you don't feel fit, even though you might physically know that you're strong and you're fit, but you just don't feel it because there's no fuel there.
100%.
I've heard that if you become more fat adapted, you can use more fuel for energy, but the science I've read is that your performance actually isn't any better. And in fact, it is a bit worse in terms of short efforts. I mean, long distance sustained effort, it's not any worse, but you're not actually any better. So you're not gaining anything. It sounds cool, fat adapted, and maybe there's I haven't read much at all about this. Is way out of my understanding, but type 3 diabetes, having too much carbs consistently. So maybe there's something there about being fat adapted could help you, but purely performance wise, it definitely isn't helping you at all. And I've heard that also if you're doing a fasted ride at around versus doing a fueled ride, just around the 2 hour mark in terms of fat usage is about the same between someone who's fasted, someone who's actually fueling the ride at 2 hours, different in terms of your utilization of your fats and so on. So there's not much in there.
Exactly, and that's why like different training sessions you fuel in different ways, sometimes with solid foods that also have fats and protein, and that helps with that efficiency as well. And so it's not all about the gels and the drinks, it's all about the solid. You use a mix depending on what you're trying to get out of it, who you're riding with. I know plenty of guys that their bunch rides are just complete carnage, and so then even though they're like, oh, this is, in theory I should be able to eat a muesli bar or an energy bar or something here, they just can't, because they're just fast, like with chasing Hugh down the other day. And so you need the liquid carbs and the gels and the quick fuels. The only thing you're physically going to get down in that moment to keep you from running out of energy sooner than later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the longer rides, I've heard that you need to add in a bit of fats to help promote the body to release fats that it has got already. Things I've heard.
Awesome. Do you guys have any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
No, I don't.
Thank you, Gemma, for passing on the information about carb loading to Glen, and then thank you, Glen, for passing on to me, just so I can do it right, because clearly I was doing it wrong before. I thought I was, but nowhere near, not even close. So yeah. And so now, before big rides, I get to eat more food, which is great too. So win-win.
That's it. Like, I'm encouraging people to eat more. Like, eat more. People assume that dietitians are going to tell you that you need to stop eating and stop eating all the time. It's like, no, actually, we're trying to get people to eat more, but it's all about the timing.
I think I've got to apologise to you too, Gemma, because I feel like I've robbed you of clients or possible clients, because everything you've taught me, everything that I've learned, I just continually repeat to those who listen. Anybody who wants to do better on the bike, anybody who wants to perform better, I am spruiking your wisdom in spades. So I'm sure they thank you as well, as much as I thank you for helping me.
Yeah, on that topic too, I do feel like I owe you a consult, Gemma, just to pay you something for what I've heard through Glen. So I did have your page open a little while ago, and I was going to pull the trigger on that, but then I got waylaid. But I must thanks for the reminder. I must do that.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, I'm good. I say, like, for me, it's about making a big impact, and so it's the ripple effect. That the more people we impact, and the more people that we can teach about fueling better, the wider it spreads, and the more people enjoy cycling and get the best performance out of it. So, no, good to hear.
And I am absolutely educating those around me. To anybody who will listen, Dave set up a cycling chat group on WhatsApp for our little cycling community, and it's called All About Training. And we are forever on there just discussing optimizing your training, and nutrition has been a big topic. And so everything I've learned, I'm sorry, but I have passed on. And,
it's only a small group, only 6 of us, I think, 6 in there. Just the people that are keen to learn more.
Yeah, nice.
But absolutely, it's definitely helped. And I've for if you do use this for the podcast, I mean, a little bit of background for me is that you helped me lose 8 kilograms before nationals, and I went to nationals and we got three silver medals, and I performed really well. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that was great feedback to hear it.
Very good. Yeah, awesome.
Tour Down Under as well, when you said, like, I've got silver in all the events I went into. That was good.
Yeah. And I'm performing the best I ever have on the bike. So I'm not quite hitting the biggest power numbers I ever have. Having said that, though, I am having problems with my power meter. So I'm just not sure what it is. But let's blame the power meter. I'm feeling good, and I'm riding fast, which is, that's
what matters. They're riding fast and getting medals.
Yes.
But Gemma, I think our session is just about it. So thank you so much for the invite.
And, it was good chatting. So I had fun.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Siri said welcome too.
Thanks for listening in. I'm Dr. Gemma Sampson. Like, subscribe, fuel your ride, and I'll see you next time.